years of business, I'm always consistently surprised about why people don't take advantage of personal branding. Now, I'm saying to myself, why don't they do that? They either are afraid of it, they don't believe it, or they don't like it. And it's interesting because in 1988, when I began my business, it wasn't personal branding. It was called You Have to Have a Tagline. So my tagline was discovering the style within you. And they would say, well, you're talking about fashion. And I said, no, it's about style, the way you walk into the room, the way you embrace people, and the way you connect. Because I believe in this world you must connect with people. Because people buy people. They don't buy products, they don't buy service, they buy people. So let's go back to the premise. So why don't we take advantage of personal branding? Whether you're an entrepreneur or you're owner of your own, or you work for a corporation, why don't you take advantage of personal branding? Some of it's because we don't know how to do it, we're afraid of it, or why should we do it? People know we're good at what we do, so they should buy what we do, right? Why do we have to extend ourselves? Of course, you know I'm very competent. You know that I've worked very hard on my business, so you should buy my services. You should be my friend. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. You have to engage people, and how you have to engage people is be able to tell them what you do. And I'll give you a quick story. I started my practice in 1988, and at that time there was no such thing as an image consultant. And I came from sales, so kind of understood sales. You need to sell people. And I felt in my 14 years of being a top sales agent that I was tired of doing that, and I wanted to do something that I would make a difference. So I decided, how do I change my brand? So what I did was I spoke to, in 3 years, spoke to anybody who'd listen to me. Kiwanis Club, Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce, anybody who could breathe, they would listen to me. And I didn't sell them anything, because my purpose was not selling them. My purpose was, how do I learn about them and what they need? Because the most important thing, as we've heard all morning, is that part of it is adaptive, meaning how do you connect to folks, and the why. Because most folks today really want to be connected to you, and especially in a world that is so changing so quickly. So I went out for 3 years to just talk to people and see if they could understand me and how I could really promote my brand. So what I think is very critical for all of you to think about, and you have a piece of paper, is write down, what makes you special? Honestly, what makes you special? Now, it's not going to be a quick fix, because what the hardest thing for most people to do is be able to look at themselves to say, what makes you special? And it's interesting about the personal branding piece, Tom Peters in 1997 in Fast Company said, we have to treat ourselves as a brand. We have to look at ourselves as what is that we can do if we were a Coke, if we were a Nike, or if we were Apple. What can we do to promote ourselves, to connect ourselves to the audience? Most the other thing I think is very important about personal branding, you need to know your target market. Because you cannot sell widgets to someone who's not building something, right? So one of the things I think is so critical about personal branding is that most people forget that we think because we have what we do, that everybody should buy our services. And not necessarily so, because you have to find the right fit. And finding the right fit is even more critical today than it's ever been, because most folks today are out of a job. And most folks will say to me, you know, I can't find a job because no one needs my services. I will say to them, what makes you different? What makes you different? And most folks can't dig deep enough to find out what makes them different. So I always ask your clients. Ask the people you worked with, what do they see that's different about you? And begin that kind of a log in terms of trying to figure out what makes you feel different. The other thing, I think is when you think of personal branding is that you say to yourself, okay, if in fact that is important to have a brand, what is the brand? And you ask yourself that question, what is your brand? And you say to yourself, well, I don't really know. Well, you have to start digging really deep about your brand. Because today, even in a corporation, if you work in a corporation, which I think is even tougher sometimes to determine your brand, because you have this umbrella that's tied to this management firm or this firm that you work with, and you have to differentiate yourself by being able to stand out above everybody. And part of that is being able to determine what is that makes you special. So you look at Apple. I love Apple. And Apple is a great example of terms it made themselves. They weren't a computer, really. They are a computer, but they're not a computer. They're a phone, but they're not a phone. They're an iPad, but they're not an iPad. They do something because it's magical to us. It makes us feel good when we touch it. Also, what's interesting, they are not about customer satisfaction. They're about customer loyalty. What is it that you do that continues to bring people back to you that says, I want to be with so-and-so. I want to buy the Apple. I want to work with Sally because she's a great instructional designer. What is that brings you back to that? And that's what you want to look at for yourself into that special sauce. Because one of the things you want to ask yourself in your brand, what makes you special? What makes you desirable? What is it that is constant, that it never fails? What is it that you know that is consistent, meaning that you're trustworthy, and that people or your clientele or whoever it is that comes to you and wants you because you are special? Sometimes I find it difficult when I'm working with folks who will come to me and who will say, I'm really good. And I'll say, why? And they say, well, because I'm really good. And I'll say, why? Because I'm really good. And I said, okay, tell me about a project you just worked on that says you have been very successful. Tell me about the impact that you made on that group that you worked with. What was the effect to the bottom line? Who were the people that benefit from it? What was the desire for it? And they will look at me blankly. And I do understand that, because what happens is that we're so busy servicing other people, we think, or providing services that we don't think we have to promote ourselves. Because you figure that we're very successful at what we do, so why should we have to promote ourselves? You have to do it in an inclusive way. That's the other thing that's important about your brand. It has to be inclusive to those that use your product, and then how can it be flexible and take it to the next step? Think about a product that you currently use, that you absolutely love. And think about that product and why do you love it? Did you happen to come across it because someone recommended it? Did you come across it because you just happened to go there and you liked it? What brings you back to that product on a consistent basis? I want you to think about that. Because if you can't think about that, then you take yourself and you become that product. You become that service. You become the company that you can own and run and be successful at. In my practice of 22 years, I have found that on an inconsistent basis, I still have to continue to do that. And one of the companies that I work for that's very, very successful, they have this PIE, P-I-E. Performance, impression, and exposure. That's another part of your brand that has to be critical, is what is a consistent performance? What is your impression of yourself? What is the impression of your company? Because half the battle when I first started my business was dressing people, helping people look good, because it was so important when someone walked to the room that you knew you could trust them, and that you knew that they were the person you wanted to be working with, and that you felt that they were competent. And more people today don't take care of that. They discount that. They say it doesn't really matter. It does matter because people need to be engaged to you. And then the other one is exposure. How do you expose yourself in the social media? And I know that we talked about there's a Facebook, there's a Twitter, there's a LinkedIn. Those things are critical to your brand because you must be on those things. And you must be consistent to your brand. The other thing that's very important about your brand is it has to be a continual of what you do. Many times what we do, especially as entrepreneurs, we get a little off track because we feel we need to do something to sort of, I call, earn money. And I think it's important to earn money, don't misunderstand me. But if you absolutely don't love but have a passion for what you do, you're not going to succeed. You can't, and I know it sounds trite, because people say you have to make a living, so I have to do certain things to make a living. I understand you have to make a living, but you have to absolutely love what you do. Because if you don't love what you do, you have to stop right now and figure out what you love what you do, because Steve Jobs is absolutely correct about that. And was it easy? I went from selling houses, which I thought was very, very good at, but it didn't make me feel good. And what happened in my community, because I was very successful, people would come to me and say, you know, you're really good about connecting to people. You're really good about helping folks kind of look good. And I said to myself, I really like doing that. I like helping people succeed. Because when they succeed, I succeed in my business. Because for me, it's so important when I work with folks that they're good at what they do, and they're competent in what they do, and they're successful at it. Because so many times I get individuals who are so really good at what they do, they have the technical skills, and what happens, they can't say it, people can't feel it, and most times senior management will say to me, you know, I can't put this person in front of a group. And so what I'm trying to tell folks is that when the first time is that it's so important for people to see you, feel you, and breathe you, and especially your brand. So back to the piece about developing your brand. Do you all have a log that you keep track of your successes? Do you keep track of your failures? Because what happens when you learn from your failures? I know it's as painful as it must be, the times that I have not succeeded, I've always cataloged it, written it, and found out why didn't I succeed at it. Many times, I was just working with a group recently, and they came to me and said, you know, it's very difficult for us to tell people what we do. Because when we tell them what we do, they get, and I can't tell you what they do, they tell me what you do, people are afraid of us. I said, well, how do you think when people hear I'm an image consultant? They get nuts. Instead of looking at me as someone as an asset, sometimes they look at me as an enemy. There's not my client base. My client base are the people who look at me and see as an asset, because that's what you want to know about your brand too. Is your brand an asset to those that use you? Do they love you? Do they understand you? And if they don't, that is not your target market. Because I think that's the most important thing, is that years ago someone said, if you have a product that everybody can use, you're probably not going to succeed really well, unless you can define the product and make it seem special and make it seem different. Because if you don't make it seem different and special, people are not going to buy it. So you ask yourself, if you were to start a log and start a catalog in terms of what you do, what are the key things that you should ask yourself? Number one, who's my target market? Number two, have it been successful in that target market? Right? Number three, is it absolutely something you feel they absolutely need? Number four, is it something absolutely for yourself you absolutely love to sell? Do you track those successes? Do you go back to your brand or your client base and find out what exactly they like and why they use you? Is your brand incorporated in your 30 to 60 second intro? Can you say it easily and quickly, what you do, instead of stumbling? Do you have a website that's a part of your brand? Are you promoting yourself in social media besides the Twitter? Because the most important thing is, if you take advantage of this personal branding, you will be far ahead of everybody else. Because personal branding is critical. It's not easy. It can be painful in the beginning, but once you understand your brand and people can see it and touch it, you will be successful, and you will be another person who will say, I have this product and I love it, people love it, I enjoy it, and they buy it. Thank you.